So it's 2024, and I think I still need to ask the question, are tripods dead? Is there still a use for tripods in photography? I think the answer is yes. There is still a need for tripods in photography today. But there is just a slight qualification that I want to give you when I say that. Technically, to execute a shot handheld that is sharp, I think technically we can get away in many instances without tripods. But creatively, I think we still need tripods. So let me talk to you a little bit about that. All right, so I've come back inside to talk to you a little bit about why I think tripods are not dead. You know, there is a distinction that I want to make between technically possible and creatively enabling. Those are the two words that I'll use for this discussion and why I think tripods are still a very useful piece of equipment in the photographic chain of events. You know, it was just a couple of years ago that even the cool IBIS or in-lens image stabilization that was being used by manufacturers, there were still minute movements of the mechanisms that could, and I say could, lead to a degradation in image sharpness. There were moving parts in the camera, and sometimes those moving parts became a little bit misaligned or oscillated a little bit in such a way that it might create some blurriness or loss of sharpness. But today, with the IBIS and the in-lens image stabilization that's available, I don't really see that as a factor. So technically, I think it's really possible to get by without using a tripod. I think that the technology in our cameras these days is so great that we can do so much of what we want to do and need to do handheld. So that's the technical side of things. Technically, we can, I think, live a rich photographic life without using a tripod. But creatively and artistically, that's where I want to talk to you about why I think you should still use a tripod in the field. All right, off to number one. The first reason why I think you need a tripod is when you're using long lenses. So long lenses, 400, 600, 800, that type of stuff. And the reason being is that when you're using long lenses, any amount of movement is exacerbated when you get to the end of this lens barrel. So just a small little bit of movement at the camera body makes for a big movement down here at the end of the lens barrel. And that's largely because of increased reach and decreased field of view, right? We're looking at just a very small portion of the landscape when we're looking through long lenses. And so any minute little bit of movement is really exacerbated or accentuated by the time we get to the lens barrel and looking at our field of view out in the field. So when shooting wildlife, motorsports, any type of action where you're using a long lens, if you don't have a lot of light for a really high shutter speed, then I might suggest trying to use a tripod or a monopod to help stabilize this long lens. And whenever you're using a long lens as well, I mean, these things are heavy, right? They weigh a little bit. And so when you're holding this up, your arms are going to get tired. You will have some muscle fatigue. And when that happens, you start shaking. And we can have so much movement in our body that it's greater than what the in-body camera stabilization can provide to you. So again, long lens, heavy weight, limited field of view, exacerbated motion, I think that reason is a great reason to use a tripod. All right, the next reason why I advocate for using a tripod is that they are essentially mandatory when you have very long shutter speeds. So 3/4 of a second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, half an hour, whatever it may be, you need a stable platform to support your camera while you have long shutter speeds. So shooting water motion, so waterfalls, creeks, rivers, that type of stuff, the ocean. Anytime you're wanting to blur the water, you typically have longer shutter speeds. Doing any sort of night photography, you'll have a minute, 2 minutes, 10-minute types of exposures. You need a stable platform. Time lapses is another reason. You have to keep the camera in the same location, and the only way to do that is with a tripod. So anytime you need a long shutter speed, you have to have a tripod. All right, here's the next reason why I think you should use a tripod. And this really gets to the heart of artistic composition. Having your camera on a tripod helps you really evaluate and assess your composition. When you can look through the viewfinder without the camera moving, when you can raise your head up and look around and put your eye back to the viewfinder, look at all of the elements in your composition, that is a benefit. It helps you create more artistic photographs. It lets you do edge patrol, so looking around the edges of your frame to make sure that nothing is peering into or peeking into your frame. Edge patrol is important, but really it's assessing and refining the composition before you press the shutter button. You know, how many times have you taken a picture and then gotten home and looked at it and said, I didn't see that, or I wish I would have done this differently. Having your camera on a tripod can help you with all of those things. As I said, you can assess the composition, the visual balance, the visual weight, the rule of thirds, whatever it may be. You have the luxury of really taking your time to create the best composition possible. Now, here's the next really important artistic benefit for using a tripod while in the field. Tripods slow you down. And I think this is a good thing, not a bad thing. I think slowing down is a good thing. When you're slower, you're more thoughtful, number one. You're more thoughtful about what images you compose and take. Number two, slowing down helps you be in the moment, on location. It helps you get in touch with your subject, with your surroundings. It helps you feel what the landscape or the subject is telling you. And then you can then in turn take that and turn that into a really connective photograph. So it helps you be in the moment a little bit more. The other thing that slowing down does is that it helps you spot a possibly better composition. Right? You have the luxury of looking around and finding the optimum composition, and doing that without wasting a lot of frames. Okay, there's a lot of people that'll walk up into a location and just boom, 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 all over the place, and then sort out the mess in post-processing or when they get back home. I choose to instead create better photographs in the field. I create fewer photographs, but I'm more thoughtful in the photographs that I take. So I think having your camera on a tripod helps you spot potentially some better compositions, but it also helps you look at little nuances in a composition. So you may have a wide angle shot and you'll see just a small little area of the frame that maybe has a really cool shape, texture, pattern, or color that you want to highlight. You might not miss that if you're just walking around snapping handheld shots. And then lastly, this slowing down and having your camera on the tripod, it takes away some pressure to shoot. When we are walking around with a camera in our hands, subconsciously we feel a pressure that, oh, I should be photographing because I have a camera in my hands. So by taking the camera out of our hands, it takes away some of that pressure to feel like I need to be shooting, I need to be productive, I need to make pictures. Instead, it lets you be in the moment, really choose your compositions well, look for the nuances in your location, and be relaxed and enjoy the process of photographic creation instead of rushing through the process. All right, let me just take a quick moment and say, you know what? There's a lot of great people taking fantastic photographs without a tripod. So I don't want to say never ever shoot without a tripod, but to effectively not use a tripod, you have to have really good working knowledge of your exposure triangle. You have to be able to quickly spot compositions that are fulfilling and wonderful and artistic and all that kind of good stuff. And those are learned skills that we all can aspire to. Not everybody is there. So just don't get me wrong and say you can only shoot on a tripod. There's plenty of reasons why not to use a tripod. For me, myself, there's lots of situations where I don't use a tripod. I could be shooting wildlife and it's just not applicable to use a tripod or possible. When I shoot motorsports, I don't use a tripod. And then also when I'm doing landscape and nature work, I may walk around a location and take test shots. So I'll walk around with my camera and take different shots and see how they translate into the camera. Because as you know, our Mark I eyeballs see a huge wide scene, and how that is distilled and translated into our camera can be a little bit different. So for me, I love taking test shots to see how things might work and if a compositional location is worthwhile or not. All right, I've given you a lot of reasons why I think you should use a tripod. But let me tell you about a few of the dangers of using a tripod. And these are dangers that I think you need to be aware of when you're out in the field trying to create photographs. And, the first danger is something that I'm aware of every time I go out and use my tripod. And that is the minute you put down your tripod, it's going to be difficult to move. We get rooted in that spot that we put our tripod down, and psychologically we don't really want to move from that spot. We think it's the best. So whenever I go out with my tripod, I make sure that the spot that I put my tripod down in is one that I don't really want to move from. And while I'm there, I will make a point to move, if I need to, the 4 or 5 inches left or right that I need to create the best composition. So being rooted in location is one of the biggest dangers of using a tripod. We just don't want to move it. There's something psychological about it, and it's just the way it is. So that's one of the dangers. The other kind of danger with using a tripod is that it can impede free-flowing creativity. And by free-flowing creativity, that means to me just walking around a location, responding to what you see, what you feel, what you smell, what you hear, and shooting photographs from that. So just being able to just freely walk around and create photographs is one of the impediments when you use a tripod. But as I said earlier, to do a free-flowing creative exercise walking around with your camera, you have to be relatively good at spotting good compositions, knowing your exposure triangle. Otherwise, you're going to come home and a good chance is going to delete a good portion of those photographs. So impediments of free-flowing creativity. And lastly, one of the dangers of using tripods that I see over and over again on my workshops is people get frustrated with using them. Because they don't use them that often, people are unaccustomed to having to raise and lower, to set it up, to break it down. And even just raising the height up and down just a little bit or moving 4 to 5 inches can oftentimes be so frustrating to people that they just stop using their tripods. Plain and simple. And so, developing the skill set where you're comfortable using your tripod, you don't get frustrated by it, you're willing to make small adjustments to it. Those are things that I would recommend to aspire to when using a tripod for your photography. All right, so there you have it. There's my rationale for why we still need to use tripods in the field. Technically, of course, we can execute without, but creatively, I think it's essential for us to continue to use tripods because it allows us to slow down, assess our composition, shoot long exposures, and really be in the moment. Because half of this hobby is about the experience and being on location in these beautiful spaces and really soaking that in. If our face is glued to a viewfinder, we're not going to be in the moment and experience the location. So, as an experiential photographer, I think being there and being very observant and noticing the small details and nuances of a location, that enriches the experience, and that enrichment comes through into our photographs. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to subscribe down below and stay tuned for the next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.